So welcome everybody to this show. It's been quite a while since we've been recording, so I'm glad to get back into it now, and hopefully I'm not going to stumble along the way, so we'll see how this goes. So today we have got a very special guest. She's been working with Red-Fern for at least 3 to 4 years now, developing thought leadership content, high quality content for some of our higher level projects, very strategic, very knowledgeable, so I'm sure you're going to enjoy this show. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to jump back onto the slide deck, and I'm just going to let you know what we're going to be speaking about today. So today we are going to be speaking about content versus design. What comes first? A big topic when designers and copywriters collaborate together. What can a copywriter bring to the table? Why work with a copywriter? So there's a massive talking point that we'll be going through with Helen there. Should you work with a copywriter? It's not for everyone. Copywriting isn't for every project. It's not for every person and every project that you work on. So we'll be touching on that point. What does good look like? Good copy, good design, good process. That for me is key for a successful project. So I'm going to try and nail down Helen there on what she means by that. And also things that can go wrong and how to avoid them. So Helen's got a wealth of experience, and she's hopefully going to educate you on how not to go wrong through the project when it comes to design and copywriting. So without further ado now, I'm going to move on to Helen's bio. So she has got 14 years marketing experience, agency side and in-house. So plenty of experience for us to delve into there. She's set up and leading the team at Incredibble since 2013. So Helen's agency is called Incredibble Marketing. Well, she might correct me on that, but it's definitely called Incredibble. And you can see the play on words there for Dibble and Incredibble. So there we go. She's delivered training courses for EU funding initiatives, KPMG's Entrepreneurial Spark, and countless SME, and this is a new word to me, symposiums. So I didn't actually know that word until I looked it up, until Helen sent me this through. Spearheaded copywriting mentoring programs, works with blue chip companies, C-suite executives, and businesses dedicated to finding their voice and telling great stories. B2B tech expertise in MarTech, FinTech, Retail Tech, EdTech, crypto, and software development companies. So without further ado, I am going to introduce you to Helen. So hi, Helen, and welcome to the show.
Hello. What a charming intro. Thanks. Yeah, really good to be here.
Yeah, I didn't stumble too much there, so hopefully that was okay.
Asked with approval, absolutely.
Yeah. And hopefully your introduction and your bio, your experience was covered in everything that I mentioned there. So,
thank you.
And you've managed to get your setup at home ready for today.
We are in the Incredibble home office. Everything's looking good. Yeah. Hopefully it'll hold out for the duration. But yeah, thanks for the intro. 14 years made me feel quite old. Yeah. I didn't realise. I remember when it was 10 and I was so chuffed, and now it's 14 and I'm feeling.
Well, I'm not going to tell you.
Passes.
Yeah, I'm not going to tell you how long I've been doing it. So what we'll do now is I'm going to jump into the first slide. So just give me 1 second here. So the first thing that we're going to be talking about is content versus design. So again, I think we've had many conversations around this as to what comes first when you're delivering a strategic project for SMEs, for large blue chip companies. So I'm just really keen to understand what your thoughts are on this.
Well, I think this is a really pointed comment. It's a really interesting subject to get into. And actually what you said a moment ago about content design, what comes first when design and copywriting companies work together, I don't think it starts there. I think it starts way before that. And it's actually the client understanding that content and design have to work together to be really, really powerful. And if I'm going to give you a really short answer about what comes first, it's neither. Neither comes first. And I think the user or the reader has to absolutely be the number one priority. And you look at them and what they need, and then hopefully the copy and the design falls out of that.
So do you think, like from previous projects that we've worked on, because I think we've changed the process quite a few times, haven't we, to try and optimize that? And I feel like we've pretty much nailed it down now. But do you think it always comes back to the goals of the client and the reader that you're trying to engage with?
It does, but it also comes down to, so there's two answers, I suppose. It also comes back to the goals. Yes, absolutely. It comes back to what the reader is wanting to achieve and what their mission is when they come onto a website or they read a piece of copy. But I think a lot of the time, because when I think about how budgets are split and I think about how a client would approach the project, they think about the visuals, because we're visual creatures, right? So we think about the beautiful stuff that you guys create, and actually the copy then is like, oh, we'll add the words in later. But really those words make the design work, and the other way around. So they have to be fused. They have to work at the same time. I think the way we work together is really great, because we will come in early to a project and we'll have those conversations, and we'll make sure that we do that before you even start designing, which is great. So we can really flesh out what something needs to look like and make sure the hierarchy is right on the page, that the call to actions make sense, and we have that strategic view across the whole of the site. But if that wasn't the case, there are other projects where we've been brought in as an afterthought, as kind of like, guys, your page is all wrong. It doesn't look right in terms of design. What we're going to do here, you know, we're squeezed in as an afterthought. And that's why I think it's wrong. I think it needs to be considered at the beginning.
Yeah. I think one of the things that we've done recently on another project, which they had their own copywriters, is we actually did what are called high fidelity wireframes. So we actually scoped out what the pages may look like from a layout perspective, then give that to the copywriter. They write the copy, and then we design on top of that initial layout. So I don't know if that's something you've come across recently.
Yeah, absolutely. It's something I'm trying to get more of my team to do, is to wireframe when they create the copy.
Yeah.
So that in that situation, the copy is leading it. It's very rare that we're actually in that situation. It's my dream that one day we come in before anything else is thought about, to really be able to structure the page. Yeah. But I think that's the skill that wireframing is the skill that copywriters need, I believe.
Yeah. I think that process for us worked really, and for the client as well, worked really well, because there was no... Cool. I don't think there's any right or wrong answer, but it's just getting the layouts of the pages correct that then align with the copy. So and engaging with the client. So is that everything you're on that? Yeah, I suppose we kind of.
I think so. Hierarchy of messaging was the other thing I wanted to write down, but I think we talked about that.
Yeah.
Have I answered your question?
Yeah, I think so. But like I say, I think we've got a good. I don't think there's any right or wrong answer in content versus design. I do think the process of a layout to a page, and then the content writer, the copywriter coming in at that stage, is the correct way to go. Because I think to do a design for a page and then throw that at the content writer can totally take the project off kilter and just lose focus on the goal of the page itself. So, So,
interesting.
So I'm going to jump to the next slide now. And the next one we are going to talk about is, what can a copywriter bring to the table, and why work with a copywriter? So I know why we work with you. Can you tell everybody else why everybody needs a copywriter?
Well, maybe you should answer the first question. I think this is twofold. I think there are two things, and depending on where you're at, you'll have one reason or another, you being the client in this situation. Yeah. So it's either this is really painful, and if you're a strategic marketer, if you're at the top of your game, you're getting a new website done, or you're doing a new piece of copy or collateral, there is a frustration in not being a writer, because it's not everyone's core skill. As copywriter, it's all they do. So I think in that situation, we can alleviate doubt and inadequacy around copywriting when it's not someone's core skill, and take away the time and frustration. So I think there's that side of it. But then I think there's the wider picture, and a copywriter who is an absolute expert in your space. So we found that because we're doing quite a few different tech projects now, and that's really become our specialism, you see the trends across things, and you pick up on the terminology, and you also pick up on the styling, and not just from the service line in the industry of tech, but also in terms of what other best practice looks like in terms of marketing. And then you've got more perspective to add, and clarity, and that experience coming in. I think it can work both ways. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I think if I was to jump back into that question there, so what can a copywriter bring to the table? If you were to bullet point those, what would that be? So for me, the strategy. There is, the insight sessions that we run at clients with yourself, I'm blown away with the way that you get under the skin of a business to really find their tone of voice. So I suppose from a bullet point list, what does a copywriter bring to the table? Because I don't think people actually value it enough.
That's really, thank you. I don't think so either. And I think that's really interesting. So we would bring the strategy and the insight. So when we do an insight session, we're bringing to the table, this is not going to be a bullet pointed list. This is going to be several words strung together, but maybe we can bullet point it afterwards.
Yeah.
Okay. So the insight session is all about figuring out the audience, but from that falls so much more than just words, because you can see, we will map the customer journey. So we know what sort of messages they need to hear when. Mapping a customer journey then gives you marketing strategy information to feed into that. We will be able to do your tone of voice and your brand values. So understanding those and then giving you a voice in terms of how you should speak. And then that gives you clarity across all your marketing. People are even picking up that information now increasingly and using it in starter books. So, and for new people joining the team, it's like, this is how we write. This is what we talk about. And I think you've got something similar with your culture book at Red-Fern.
Yeah.
So this is how we speak. This is what we do. And that can come from a copywriter, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
It will also give you we add an element of structure because we have to be quite structured in terms of what we do. So I think that plays into the process piece. But also in terms of the actual copy, really brilliant copy that does persuade somebody to do something, move somebody forward, gives something in motion, make sure it's all really consistent. There are no errors. That's that whole big picture.
Yeah. So I think one of the biggest things for us is your insight session. So when a client tries to give a designer a brief, it's very factual as to what they want. But when you do your insight session and you get under the skin of a business and you pull out specific keywords and then you rewrite that brief to a designer, that is far easier to create a better design and to align with what somebody thinks of their business than it is to just take a brief off a marketing manager or even the business owner sometimes, because they don't know how to articulate it in a professional manner sometimes because they're too intrinsic in the business. Yeah.
That's really interesting. Yeah. I think for us, I think like any designer or copywriter, the thing that's made me really want to do that is having a wider team. Yeah. So when you're a single copywriter, sometimes you can just internalize the stuff and then sort of spit it out at the end. But having to brief somebody else has made that part of my process much more important.
Yeah.
So getting the copywriter's brief out has been a result of having other people around me, which has influenced so many other things. But that's really nice feedback. I didn't actually know that it impacted on your design process so much. That's really cool.
Yeah. But it just helps. It just helps get a deeper understanding of a business and where to take the design. So and I mean, you could actually throw that back at us and say, well, why don't we do that? But I just think a journalist, ex-journalist, content writer, whatever that might be, is far better at articulating than a designer is because they're more visual than they are verbal, if that makes sense.
Interesting. So,
yeah.
Very cool.
So the next, so I think we did well there. I think if we jump to the next slide now. So should you work with a copywriter? It's not for everyone. So the same for me again here. I would have said 5 or 6 years ago, I would never have thought of working with a copywriter because to me, a business should know what it needs to talk about. But after working with yourself and everything we've kind of just touched on, I think, copywriters are a prerequisite to any successful project. And definitely when you get to the higher level projects, when you've got a tone of voice and brand values. So, but smaller projects, it's like you say, it's not for everyone. So what are your thoughts?
It's not for everyone. Yeah, I think there are two things, budget and belief. I think if you've got enough belief, you find the budget. So maybe belief is the thing that you really need. But it depends on your setup and your situation. But if you haven't got the buy-in to a copywriter, then getting buy-in to a copywriter, you've got to suck it and see. And everybody I've spoken to, it really is transformative. And I know you've been through that experience yourself, how much easier things can become and clearer. But convincing stakeholders, that's something that's a big barrier sometimes. Budget is often put towards the more glamorous visuals because we're visual creatures, like we've said. That's immediately where you think in pictures. So you're thinking about how you want your website to look or how you want your collateral to look. You're not necessarily thinking about what you want it to say. And I think actually there is still, everybody can write. There's a brilliant book that's on my shelf somewhere by Anne Handley called Everybody Writes. Because everybody writes, right? So justifying that can be, if you've got a small budget and you're working with stakeholders who aren't bought into the idea, can be really, really tough. I think the only other time I'd say when it is connected to budget, But it can be particularly tricky if you're a very, very new business and your proposition is changing all the time. Then you invest in copywriting and 6 months later, everything's changed because your business is going through rapid growth and evolution. And either you need a huge budget because you've just invested it and getting the return is then different, or maybe you bootstrap it and you do it in different ways.
Yeah.
What's been your experience of budget and belief in what not working or working with a copywriter?
I mean, I suppose, you know how we've transitioned the business to work in partnership with businesses now to achieve goals. It's not about individual projects. So I think, that goal setting process at the beginning and qualifying what a client's trying to achieve, and then giving them a range budget for design and copy is where we'll always position it. I think to not, you give the client the option. If you don't have copy, it's a more long-winded process. It's harder to get the project delivered on time because you're waiting for people internally. So from a budget perspective, we will always push for copywriting now in a project. But if a client doesn't see the value in that, it's down to them really. So, but we will still kick back and say, well, if you're trying to achieve this goal over a 12-month period, professional copy is definitely part of what you need. So yeah. So, do
you ever think there's a situation where a copywriter isn't needed?
Well, I was just going to ask,
budget.
Well, yeah, I was just going to ask you that question. If they've got internal copywriters, I suppose.
Yeah.
It depends. I mean, we do come across businesses that are employing like uni grads, straight out of uni as English degrees and what have you. But it doesn't. You can't. It's that old adage of. You mentioned 14 years experience and it makes you feel old, but there's 14 years value there, isn't there?
Absolutely. Thanks. Yeah, there is. Yeah. And I remember when I was a graduate straight out of university and copywriting I didn't go into copywriting role. I went into a general marketing role.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I would not have had the business insight to be able to do what I do now. That's the thing that I find is missing from very junior marketing or copywriting people. Yeah. They might have huge creative talent, but understanding the complexity of the business sell is not always present. And that's the thing that's sometimes missing. Yeah.
And just on the point of it's not for everyone, do you, are there occasions where you'll go into a client and you'll qualify them and think, I don't think you actually need copywriting, or we're not a fit for you? What?
Definitely we're not a fit for you if I know we can't do an absolutely amazing job. So if we're not in their sweet spot, so if they're really, really specialist, if they, also I think it depends on the conversation you're able to have around copywriting, and knowing that they're really bought into the process and are up for the journey, because it can be a bit of a journey. So I think that's maybe when we qualify somebody out. I think, I've never been in to see somebody and thought copywriting isn't what you need. I usually go, you need copywriting, but you might need something else first. Yeah. And that's usually marketing. And it can even be like a culture change, a culture shift, because you're trying to do this thing down here and you need all this other stuff to happen. So I've definitely been in that position. So it might be you don't need copywriting yet, but I don't think it's ever been you don't need copywriting.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think we've delved deep enough on that topic. So I'm just going to, unless you've got any other points.
I don't think so.
So I'm just going to jump back to the slide deck. And the next one is, what does good look like? Good copy, good design, good process. So this is probably quite a deep topic. So yeah, what does good look like, Helen?
Okay, so what does good look like? My instant answer is user-centric.
Yeah.
That's what, to be able to define it more than that would have to get too specific into a particular situation, but it's user-centric. It puts that person, that reader, that individual group of people first, and whether that's UX, UI, and copywriting that flows across that, it's just absolutely got to be about your reader. And I think that's something that also, just jumping back to one of those previous questions, what does a copywriter bring? The ability to, because businesses are really good about talking about themselves, but a copywriter will help you talk in a way that somebody else wants to hear.
Exactly.
And they'll put on the shoes of the reader. So that's what good copy and probably good design looks like to me, but I'm not a designer, so I'm going to pass the question back to you. What does good design look like?
Well, I'm gonna sidestep that for a second. So I'm just trying to remember what I was thinking about then. So yeah, so from when it comes to marketing and metrics, what does good look like? We've got data that we can look at. We can, how many website visits are we getting? How many leads are we generating? But how do you quantify what good copy? Who defines it, and what's the metric against it?
Well, let them, whatever KPIs you're playing with in your marketing strategy need to flow down into your copy. Yeah. So that's why on a website, when we go in and we do those strategy sessions, what are your KPIs? What does success look like? What's the purpose of your website? Yeah. If it's just a shop window, well, you're not going to be able to measure this. Your ROI is going to be really, really hard to determine. But if somebody's got a proper campaign, inbound marketing campaign, and they know, I'm putting out this ebook, I've got the HubSpot interface locked into the back of it, and I can see how many visits I get to this page, how many downloads, and how many of those I'm then able to convert. Yeah. Brilliant. So good copy, I think you measure it like you would measure any other statistic, but it wouldn't be, you need other things around it. Absolutely. Yeah. Otherwise you have to just sort of hope, and things sound, it's a really fluffy area. And it's interesting actually, because we are usually the ones who push for those metrics, and the client is often, it's okay, it's all right, we know good. Then if they're bought in, it's amazing. When they're that bought in, they're like, we just want it to sound amazing, it's great. Yeah. So we're then asking, okay, well, tell us how many visits you got, tell us who shared it, tell us what comments were given. And we get really super excited because stats are so rarely shared with us. We absolutely love that. Also, I suppose it's fair to say it depends what kind of copywriter you are. So we are content marketing copywriters and website copywriters. If we were high converting sales leads type copywriters who just write those amazing pages that convert, yeah. Or we're doing advertising copy, yeah. I think there would be very different metrics. So it depends where you're in.
Yeah. So I think to jump back to your question of what is good design, I think the way that I look at that, or the way that Alex, our creative director, looks at it, is what is well, again, you relate back to the customer's goals, but what is the purpose of each page, and what is the intent of that page? So if it's to move on to another page, if it's to watch a video, if it's to read the whole article and get to the call to action at the bottom and get to the landing page, that to me is good design. If your page delivers on that intent, that's good design. So whether that's copy, whether that's layouts, graphics, whatever that might be, that's what I class as good design. So.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, so good process. I suppose we've kind of touched on good process, but I suppose good process to us is what we've found now is definitely doing the insight sessions with yourself to get a copywriter's view and get under the skin of a business, do the high fidelity layouts so that we can then give you an idea of what that page layout will be, and then you write that copy. So that's the process to me. I don't know if you think any different.
I think probably like you, our processes evolve quite often as we learn and we try new things. That insight session has to ideally include a demo of any products. We want to see things happening in person. We need to get under the brand values, the skin being brand values, mission, really get into the audience. I want to understand the customer journey. Speaking to the sales team is usually a fundamental part of things these days, getting in there. Then I love this high fidelity wireframes. I think that's brilliant. Absolutely a dream to have that included in the project. Yeah. But then I think there's, you and I both really like our processes, and I think we've always been very good with the projects of, stepping things out in really clear segments. Yeah. And there's often a very iterative process like there is to the designs and the copy. One of the things that's really essential in our process is that live edit that we will always do with your team, where we sit there with the designer and we go through the words as they hit the copy, as they hit the page, and just do that final tweak. And I know a lot of that falls out if you've got the wireframes going on, but I always think that final polish really gets the site where it needs to be.
Yeah. I think one of the things about good process is a lot of times people will question, well, how does that copywriter know my industry, know my product? And the process of interviewing technical specialists within a business to deliver on technical pages, we've kind of got that process down now as well, haven't we, to do those interviews?
Good point.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think even if we can call ourselves and consider ourselves tech specialists, but we'd never write copy without having spoken to those absolute key tech people. You just can't. You don't want to presume anything.
No.
And there are things that you hear, and different words you hear, and different phrases, and it's really nice to hear things. Also, copywriters are generally nosy and love talking to everybody, so it kind of works, and they want to get the big full picture, and then they'll get into it. So yeah. It's a really essential part, and it's really important for relationships as well. I think that it really helps embed the team within wider stakeholders, which helps the marketing department justify everything. So it's good for that. And I think part of the process as well is not only including that in it, but the communication of the process, which, I mean, you have so many systems which are brilliant. Like you use Basecamp, it's brilliant for being able to relay that to the client. I think it's essential.
Cool. Yeah. So I think if we move on to the final slide now, so I'm just going to bring that up. So the final slide is, and this is a good one because I always think, you know, if you can mitigate risk in any project, or at least have a projection of what that might be, things that go wrong and how to avoid them. So if a client knows potential hurdles, those conversations are much easier to have once you hit that hurdle. So yeah, I think if you just delve into that for us a little bit.
So much in this bit. Okay, so I think for the client, when things have gone wrong, quite recently, it was because the vision wasn't shared. So I was working with a client, and me and the lead person in the client had a very clear vision about what we were talking about. It was like we were using one set of language and everybody else was using a slightly different set of language to describe what we were trying to do. So when it came to actually executing on our plan, it kind of collapsed a little bit. And it collapsed probably about 2 or 3 times during the project, which was really fascinating to observe, because stood with the client, we're like, yeah, no, I know what you mean, but I don't think we've articulated it properly to the copywriter and properly to the design team their end either. So that, I think, has been a big lesson for me this year: share the vision and get everybody bought into the vision to make sure it's really, really clear. And you're talking that sort of unified language of what you mean. Does that resonate with you as well? Has that happened your end?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, on technical projects, it's like you've got to create your own glossary of terms. Between each person, because somebody might, when somebody says a user or an admin, they might have a totally different perception of what that is when you're building a system as to what you do. So there is a qualifying piece of any project where you've got to make sure whether you're from the north, south, Midlands, you've been brought up on a different language set completely, you've got to understand that you're agreeing what certain terms mean. So yeah, from the values perspective that you mean, that, yeah, we definitely come across that.
That's really cool. Yeah, nice to know I'm not alone, because it was a big learning curve this year. It really was. I think as well, things will go wrong if there's poor.
So what have you done, you know, from that experience then? What have you learned on how to avoid that next time?
How to avoid that next time. So we always ask for a demo now. Always. So we're really clear on what we're delivering. And I write better briefs for my writers. Even though I write briefs all the time, I didn't share a vital piece of knowledge that was in my head. And I didn't speak to the wider team that end. So the person who was actually designing it wasn't in the first meeting when we had that insight session. So she missed out on all the vision, on everything I was describing and how I feel like it should be like this and it should go like that. So sharing more, always oversharing probably, just giving away as much information as possible, not being afraid to re-clarify things. And I think there's I think about communication in general, you can assume stuff really easily. You can just assume knowledge. And I did that a lot. So I think making sure I don't assume, just checking in on myself.
So I mean, we've got to the end of the slide deck now though, but I just want to touch on possibly a conversation we had a week or so ago, because, you know, you've got a team of writers that work for you, and you've come from your background of uni, journalist, in-house. You can correct me if I'm saying it wrong here, but I suppose, you know, for people that are watching this, whether you're a content writer, a designer that's interested in how copy integrates into a design process, is to try and understand your path to owning a business. I suppose writing briefs. Do you prefer writing briefs, or do you prefer writing copy for clients?
Oh man, That's a really interesting question. Okay, so my journey, do you want me to talk about my journey and then answer that question? Yeah. Okay, so my journey, I wasn't a journalist, but I did English. I fell into marketing. I did that for several years. Really didn't like what I did because I was basically just doing admin and had no career growth or anything. And I went traveling and I started blogging and I met a copywriter. She read my stuff. She introduced me to her boss. The next thing I know, I'm copywriting. And it was this amazing combination, the perfect storm of all these things. I had loads of freedom. I was surrounded by entrepreneurs and independent people. I was in a really creative environment. And it just made me go, why the hell would I ever get a job again? So I wanted to start my own business. I wanted to be a freelancer. But I honestly did not have a clue from a commercial point of view what that meant. And that has been my biggest journey. And I spend most of my free time spent sharing what I've learned and helping people, because I think everybody deserves to do what they love. And I would really love a world full of people who do what they love. Yeah. So I try to share that vision with people and enable them to basically leapfrog the shit that I did for years. Because I didn't, even though I was a good writer and I had a marketing background, and that was great. But in terms of running a business, the commercial stuff has been my biggest learning curve. So that's the side of things that has been my biggest challenge, I suppose. And in terms of now, because I have a freelance team, and in terms of whether I prefer writing a brief, that's a hard question, or doing copy. I actually spent 2 hours doing some writing this afternoon. It was bloody lovely. I never get to do writing anymore. And I look at my team and I'm amazed because they can just write and write and write, and I know I couldn't do that. Yeah. And I love building relationships with people and helping them see a vision and problem solving with them. That's great. So I couldn't do without that. Can I do both? Can that be my answer? Yeah. I would never want to give up the writing, because if I gave up the writing, I wouldn't be able to do the good brief. But if I gave up the brief, I'd be a terrible writer who was half-time employed because I never finished anything. So I think I need a balance. What about you? Because you've got a team around you now, and
yeah, I think a similar story, really. I mean, I got into web design because I wanted to get out of print, and I just enjoyed designing. I think people that enjoy what they do, and if they get good traction at the start of it, and you have the opportunity to start a business, you kind of fall into it, I think, more than anything. And I think there's a break point of where you'll get to of whether you want to be a business owner or carry on in your career.
Yeah,
I definitely feel that. I feel like I've gone through a few different barriers to keep going in business, because there's definitely times when you think, I cannot be bothered with this.
Yeah.
But I think if you persevere, I think it's definitely a better outcome, to be honest. So
yeah, absolutely. No, there was definitely a point. I remember having a conversation with my old boss at the agency I used to work at, and I said to him, "So yeah, I don't know whether I should just keep writing or become a manager, become a business owner." He was like, "Become a business owner, Dibs. This is the chairman of the agency now." And he was like, "No, this is the journey." And it has been great. I feel like I've just finished a really good book called Company of One, which has been really insightful for me in terms of being because growth has never been something. I don't want to become an agency. I don't want to employ people. It's not my model. But it has been really insightful in terms of profit for a single person business is not a case of having necessarily loads of staff, and how to really make that work for you, and how to find the balance between being a business owner and automating loads of stuff so you can still do your craft, balancing it. So it's a good book if anybody's in that situation and wants to grow. Company of One.
I think what we'll do is below the video, we're going to put all the links to any books that you've referenced, anything like that, because I'll definitely have a read of some of the books. So yeah, I think unless you've anything else to touch on, Helen, I think we'll wrap up this show. Is that okay for you?
Very good. Thank you so much. I hope it's been of use. Thank you so much for inviting me along. I've really enjoyed it.
No, thank you, Helen. And thank you very much for all the insights you've given us there in content versus design. So what we've done is we've put together a little summary on everything. So I'm just going to jump to the slide deck, jump down to the next slide. So content versus design in summary. The user and the reader have to be the number one priority. From that, the design and copy will follow. Wireframing is a skill that copywriters should aim to have. Copywriters will help a business to find their audience, tone of voice, brand values, and map the customer journey through a website, which in turn will also inform the marketing strategy. Convincing stakeholders, belief and budget are often the barriers to working with copywriters. Copywriters will help your business write in a way that somebody else wants to read and listen. So yeah, not writing it from an internal view, from a third person view. And I'm just going to jump down to the next slide. Insight sessions allow copywriters to get under the skin of a business to truly find their tone of voice, audience and brand values. That's the biggest one for me, because a copywriter really does help designers get a true vision of what a client perceives that, of how a client perceives their business. Agreeing on the vision with the client will mitigate risk in a project, making sure the content delivers on the project goals, and make sure all project stakeholders and copywriters are in every meeting and discussion to avoid any confusion. So I'm just wrapping the show up now. So yeah, probably one of the best interviews we've done there to get deep under the skin. It's been a while since we've done a video for Red-Fern. We brought a guest on like Helen that can give so much thought leadership and insights into her career and the business that she runs. So yeah, check back again soon, and we'll be releasing more videos and insights around design, marketing, creative and technology. Thank you.